Testing, 1, 2, testing, mic check, test, mic check, testing. Sound good?
Good morning and welcome. Thanks for being here. This oversight hearing of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs will now come to order. Thank the witnesses for being here. I think I've met you all this morning. This hearing will focus on the troubling allegation of the destruction of veterans' claims documents. I note that this subcommittee has previously addressed this issue on March the 3rd, 2009, in response to reports of systemic mishandling of paper documents through VBA. This subcommittee held a joint hearing with the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee. And at that time, the VA had assured Congress that they had implemented policies that would protect important claim documents. Then, Deputy Undersecretary for Benefits Michael Wolkoff testified that the VA would implement a plan that, and I quote, ensures measures are in place to prevent future incidences of employees inappropriately discarding veterans' paperwork, end quote. Yet only a few years later, the IG has documented more cases of VA employees inappropriately destroying veterans' paperwork. It may be tempting to discuss the problems uncovered by the April 14th, 2016 IG reports as understandable human error. After all, the IG reviewed more than 400,000 documents and found fewer than 100 that were mishandled. And I know that no one is perfect, but as a physician, I also know that there are times when there is absolutely no room for error. And in my line of work, people die if I make a mistake. And this same applies here. These mistakes may ultimately cost veterans their lives. Each lost document represents a veteran who may have been injured while serving our country and therefore may be entitled to medical care and other benefits. Veterans have the right to expect that the VA will carefully consider all the evidence, including paper documents, before granting or denying a claim. A lost document may result in a denied claim, which may have serious financial and emotional cost to that veteran. The seriousness of this issue is highlighted by two cases involving homeless veterans. VA has made processing claims of homeless veterans a priority because they are among the most vulnerable people in our society. And as a result of VA's outreach, two homeless individuals filed paper claims for benefits with the Los Angeles Regional Office. I would imagine that these two individuals were probably very optimistic that the VA would approve their claims and help them get back on their feet. How disappointed and upset would these veterans be if they learned that the IG had found that their unprocessed claims were about to be shredded? The truth is that these claims would not have been adjudicated if the IG had not discovered them in the shred bin. Moreover, we don't know the extent of the problem. The IG only had the resources to conduct spot checks at 10 ROs. I look forward to hearing the VA's plans to ensure that each RO has implemented procedures to ensure important claim information is not being destroyed. With that, I call on our distinguished ranking member, Ms. Titus, for her opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing today. I'd like to point out that our fellow members of the committee from Southern California requested this hearing, Ms. Brownlee and Dr. Ruiz, and I appreciate your taking the time to address the issue that's critical to all our constituents and that they noted in Southern California. I share the chairman's concerns regarding the improper handling of paperwork at the ROs and its impact on veterans' benefit. And I'm hopeful to address the problem by utilizing the processes for handling, protecting, and destroying documents as necessary. I'd also note that this committee held a similar hearing in 2008, and I hope that the VA makes the changes that we need so we won't be having another hearing like this 8 years. Should be a chairwoman of that other committee, but Congresswoman Brownlee and Ruiz for their efforts to address this issue. And that included visiting the Los Angeles VA Regional Hospital, which was kind of ground zero for this problem. Their visits led to an immediate policy change at the Los Angeles VA Regional Office and contributed significantly to the overall conversation within the VA about how to best handle electronic documents. So today we have a number of questions that must be answered by the VA. For example, the IG did spot checks at 10 different ROs and found that almost half of the documents from the shred bins they reviewed were incorrectly marked to be destroyed. In Reno, which serves my constituents in Las Vegas, 6 of 16 documents were incorrectly placed in shred bins. So I'm curious to learn about the follow-up plan from the VA and the IG to check in on the offices that did poorly in the first review, including Reno, to see how they've improved. I'm also interested to hear how moving from the antiquated paper-based processing system into VBMS will affect the VA's ability to safeguard documents. What protocols need to be updated? Is there sufficient use of automation? Are supervisors able to track employees' handling of veterans' personal information? How much of an upgrade in document control does a new electronic system offer over the old paper-based system? These are all questions that I hope to hear answers for, because we owe it to our veterans to ensure that when they entrust their personal information to the VA, it's handled appropriately and discreetly. So, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to hearing the answers to these questions and continuing to work with you and Ms. Brownlee and others on our subcommittee to address this issue, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Titus. I ask that all members waive their opening remarks as per this committee's customs. Now I would like to welcome today's witnesses. Beth McCoy, Deputy Undersecretary for Field Operations. She is accompanied by Brad Houston, Director, Office of Business Process. Brenna Ronte, Deputy Assistant Inspector General for Audits and Evaluations, Office of Inspector General. He is accompanied by Ms. Dana Sullivan, Director, San Diego Benefits Inspections Division, Office of Inspector General. I want to remind the witnesses that your complete written statements will be entered into the hearing record. Ms. McCoy, you are now recognized to present your testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Abraham and Ranking Member Titus and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Veterans Benefits Administration Records Management Program, specifically handling and disposition of veterans' claims-related documents. As you mentioned, I am accompanied today by Mr. Brad Houston, our Director of VBA's Business Process Integration Office. VBA is committed to ensuring the veterans' records are protected and maintained with accuracy and care. Today, I will address findings from 2 reports by VA's Office of Inspector General released in April 2016, one about disposition of documents at the Los Angeles Regional Office, and one based on reviews at 10 other ROs. Although the number of document handling errors IG identified in these reports was extremely small, VBA knows that every veteran's record is vitally important and sincerely regrets any human errors. We greatly appreciate the support of Congress that has enabled us to transform our antiquated paper-based claims processing system to a fully electronic processing environment using digital records in the Veterans Benefits Management System, or VBMS, to address the inefficiencies and risks associated with working with paper folders. VA has converted millions of paper files to e-folders. Nearly 6 million claims files were scanned into veterans' e-folders in VBMS between 2012 and 2015. In FY 2015, VBA also deployed the Centralized Mail Initiative to all of our regional offices. Centralized Mail reroutes all inbound compensation-related mail directly from the U.S. Postal Service to intake centers that we have at vendor sites where documents are quickly scanned and digitized. Conversion of paper records to digital records significantly strengthens the systemic protection of veterans' claims documents, which is a top priority for VBA. We have also enhanced our online claims filing capabilities for veterans and their representatives through e-benefits and the Stakeholder Enterprise Portal, helping to keep paper documents from being created in the first place, which is very important. VBA claims processors used to touch 5,000 tons of paper every year. Today, 99.8% of disability compensation claims are processed electronically. While VBA's transformation to an electronic claims processing system has significantly minimized the flow of paper documents to our regional offices, a small volume of paper documents do continue to be received in the ROs. VBA's current records management guidance provides several layers and levels of review and oversight in the process of appropriately handling and disposing of paper documents. Employees and supervisors play a critical role in the records management process, along with designated records management officers, or RMOs. During one of its benefit inspection program visits at the LA regional office at the beginning of 2015, OIG received an allegation that claims processors were shredding mail related to veterans' compensation claims. IG reviewed about 13,800 documents and found 9 documents, or 0.065%, that required supervisor or RMO annotations or some action. I want to emphasize these documents were reviewed midstream in the whole process and would still have been subject to review by a supervisor and/or the RMO prior to final disposition. The LA RO director immediately took action. He halted shredding, retrained all employees on paper document handling procedures, and reviewed the records related to those 9 documents to take all necessary final actions. IG then conducted unannounced visits at 10 ROs in July of 2016, where they reviewed 438,000 documents. In the end, the review identified 11 documents, or 0.0025% of the 438,000, that actually affected or had the potential to affect benefits. Although, again, the number of document handling errors during that 10 RO review was extremely small, we continue to emphasize that every veteran's record is vitally important and must be safeguarded. We're right now updating our records management policies to strengthen compliance and better align procedures with the current electronic environment. Finally, we cannot underscore the importance of protecting veterans' records too strongly with our employees, 53% of whom are veterans themselves. We sincerely regret when errors are made, and we continue to expand use of digital technology to eliminate potential for human error in the process. I appreciate the opportunity to address this important topic today. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I'd be happy to take any questions from you or other members of the subcommittee.
Thank you, Ms. McCoy. Mr. Arante, you're recognized for 5 minutes for the Office of Inspector General.
Chairman Abraham, Ranking Member Titus, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Office of Inspector General's recent work on the review of records disposition and alleged shredding of claims-related documents. As indicated, I am accompanied by Ms. Dana Sullivan, the Director of our Benefits Inspection Division in San Diego. VBA must be committed to ensure veterans' records are properly protected, maintained, and disposed of. A complete and accurate record is critical for veterans to receive timely and accurate benefits. Inappropriate shredding and mishandling of claims-related documents can lead to incorrect disability decisions and can affect the integrity of VBA's reported workload. As stated, in late 2008, the IG reported staff at 4 VA regional offices inappropriately discarded 132 claims-related documents. Subsequent to that review, the Undersecretary for Benefits, as you indicated, instructed regional office leadership to conduct an internal review of all regional offices and their documents scheduled for shred. That review revealed an additional 474 claims-related documents inappropriately scheduled to be shredded. As a result, VBA leadership redesigned their policies and procedures regarding the disposition of veterans' claims. The OIG Benefits Inspection Division teams conducted inspections at 9 regional offices in 2009 over a 9-month period. We conducted this review to ensure regional offices were complying with VBA's new policy. Early on in our inspections, we found very high rates of noncompliance. However, by the end of December 2009, most offices were complying with the new policies, and we did not identify any improper destruction of documents. In June 2014, the acting director for the Baltimore Regional Office identified a situation where approximately 8,000 documents and 80 veterans claims folders were improperly stored. Upon the request from that acting director, we confirmed that most of those documents consisted of processed and unprocessed claims-related material. Our findings led the Undersecretary for Benefits at that time to require each regional office director to review 100% of all workspaces to ensure these conditions did not exist at other offices. In January 2015, we received an anonymous allegation that staff at the Los Angeles Regional Office were inappropriately shredding veterans' claims-related mail. We substantiated that staff at that office were not following VBA's policies. Failure to follow key controls, such as not having a records management officer in place and staff not following the policies, led to those conditions. As such, we expanded our scope and conducted a review at 10 additional regional offices. We found 69 documents inappropriately scheduled for shredding. 55 of these documents consisted of congressional inquiries to the Atlanta Regional Office. 3 of those 55 congressional inquiries contained evidence to support a veteran's claim. Regional offices continue to deal with paper on a regular basis. In our national review, we identified some offices using between 18 and 31 large bins to store documents scheduled for shredding. Based on our analysis, most of those documents were properly scheduled and stored for shredding. However, while the number of claims-related documents we found in those bins were fewer than compared to our 2009 review, we cannot minimize the impact improperly shredded evidence could have on a single veteran. We are aware VBA is moving towards a paperless work environment and believe that as claims-related documents are scanned into VBMS, the risk of inappropriate shredding should decrease. However, we believe that risk is going to move to ensuring that there are controls to maintain and properly store veterans' documents that contain PII, and ensure that documents sent to scanning facilities are actually scanned into the electronic record. Our recent work across the nation has demonstrated VBA must remain vigilant when enforcing its policies related to the disposition of government records. Over the past 7 years, we identified several instances where veterans' official records were at risk for inappropriate destruction or mishandling. While VBA is moving towards a paperless work environment, there remain paper byproducts that must be successfully managed. VBA might not consider the number of documents we found as a systemic issue. However, we consider this to be a systemic issue in the sense that policies were not followed across the nation at the offices that we looked at. We would like to thank the VBA employees who brought these issues to our attention so we can all better serve veterans. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement, and look forward to answering any questions you or the members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Arante, for your testimony. I will begin the questioning. Ms. McCoy, this question goes to you. Please describe the procedures used by the VA Central Office, VACO, to monitor compliance with your current policies on records management.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have multiple different avenues for monitoring compliance. Those would include various headquarters entities, such as Compensation Service, Pension and Fiduciary Service. These are our headquarters policy and procedures arms. They do site visits out at our regional offices, and they check in, have that opportunity to look on the ground at records management processes and policies and compliance. Another avenue is our district directors. We have 5 districts within VBA. They go out and have very similar oversight mechanisms in place. So, for example, when I was the Central Area Director several years ago, I would go out and we would do spot checks of individual employees' desks to make sure that records were appropriately annotated and stored. We'd look in trash bins. We looked in the common areas. So there are multiple opportunities for on-the-ground oversight.
Does the central office ensure that each RO has at least one records management officer who's devoting 100% of their time to ensuring that these veterans' records are not improperly destroyed?
So there is a requirement to have a records management officer at each facility.
Is that happening?
It is happening, sir, to the sense that there are some of our offices that are so small, the Dakotas, for example, that there is an RMO that handles both of those offices. So some of the volume of paper that we're working at
But is
does
that
come into
protocol
play.
for for that to be like that? I mean, does policy dictate that there's a record management person at every regional office? I mean, is that standard?
It requires that records management officer functions are fulfilled at every office, yes, sir. So in some cases, those are not less than full-time duties, and if there's not a full-time officer, there's a requirement to check with the district and have approval for less than a full-time.
Okay. How did the VA miss that Los Angeles did not have an RMO for 2 years?
Sir, if I could clarify that, that's not correct. We had a long-time standing records management officer who was promoted. There was about a 6-month time period when this person was working in a different job in a different part of the office. Before he left that position, he trained others, including his supervisor, to cover those records management duties. And they were doing that. And he was also still helping to do those records management reviews, even in his new position. So during the transition, there was a vacancy, and they were filling that, but the duties were being fulfilled.
Well, I guess my question is, who dropped the ball there? I mean, we've had records that were inappropriately mishandled, so who takes the hit for that? Is that the RMO? Is that, somebody's got to own this problem. It was a mistake, and it was not a minor mistake. I mean, this is major stuff here. So, we have to have accountability. Who?
Absolutely, accountability is important, and we have put several layers of process in place to make sure that we handle veterans' records appropriately and safeguard them.
All right, well, so, back in 2009, the VA's answer was similar to your answer now, more training, and then now in 2016, the VA solution is again to, provide more training, better training. Now, how can we as a committee be assured that this training, more training, extra training, whatever you want to call it, would actually result in better management of these veterans' records?
Chairman, it's a very important topic, and training is a piece of it, but the bigger solution is something that Congress has helped us implement, and that is a paperless system, so that we don't have paper that we're handling and passing along, that it's scanned and digitized as early in the process as possible. We don't want to receive paper in our regional offices. We're diverting it at the post office to the scanning vendor, and we have several mechanisms for online submissions so that we don't get paper.
Okay, let me ask you one more question for my time run out. How many employees, including RO management, have been held accountable, and in what way, for noncompliance with VBA policy related to document destruction during this past year and during the last 2 years? How many have been held actually accountable?
Chairman, I don't have that information with me. I can take that for the record.
Please.
But in LA in particular, I can tell you there was one employee, a bargaining unit employee, that was held accountable for the incidents that were.
What happened to him? What happened to that employee?
I'll take that for the record. I
Okay.
believe it was a suspension.
So they're still working somewhere?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. My time's up. Ms. Titus?
Thank you. Ms. McCoy, as I highlighted in my opening statement, I was concerned but not surprised to find out that Reno once again makes the list of the worst in the country. But again, for this investigation, I wonder if you can tell me what's going on at the Reno office, if you're going to check back to see if they've improved. Is the new guidance going to help you do that? Are there any periodic checks with the places that had problems?
Thank you, Congresswoman Titus. We do have our new regional office director, Sheila Jackson, who is there on the ground, ensuring that records management is a top priority. As far as we have our Continental District, our Pacific District, we have 5 district offices. Pacific District is also making check-ins to do oversight reviews for records management.
I've met with her, and I like her, and I think she is improving the morale at that office and doing a good job, so I'm glad she's going to make this a priority as well. Well, could you tell us a little bit more about that updated guidance, when it's going to come out, how it's going to impact the backlog claims? Would you just give us a little more information about it?
I'd be happy to. So we have had a long-standing records management process that was really beefed up after 2008, So we put this multi-layer of review in so that we would minimize any risk of mishandling of documents. We updated that guidance in 2011, and we recognized in our new paperless environment that it was certainly time to update it again. So it is in draft process right now, going through the concurrence. We had hoped to have it done by the end of May, but we're needing just a little bit more time because it is an important, complex issue. So I would anticipate seeing that going through concurrence in the next few weeks or months.
And you're keeping in mind how it's going to impact the backlog, because it's not just about keeping records secure, it's about moving the process along.
Absolutely, and making sure that we have a good records handling process, cuts down on delays, and make sure that we're doing the most timely and accurate job we can for our veterans.
Thank you. Mr. Ante, can you tell us how you picked the offices that you studied?
Yes, ma'am. After what we found in Los Angeles, we made a fairly quick decision to conduct this national review. Typically, when we conduct a review, we like to statistically sample or select the offices that we want to review. But based on how fast we wanted to get this turned around, we judgmentally selected these offices. And how we did that is to minimize travel cost. We tried to select offices that were as closely co-located to a current IG field office so we could eliminate travel costs. So I believe it's 6 of the 10 offices were co-located or closely co-located with an IG office, so we selected those offices.
Okay. It wasn't just because you knew Reno was so bad, you put it on the list.
Well, so that's a good point. One of the offices where we do not have an IG, we selected Philadelphia because we knew Philadelphia. We had seen some issues with Philadelphia before. We did the same thing with San Juan.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, can you give us an update on the status of action that's been taken on some of your recommendations?
Okay, right now the recommendations are still not closed. VBA is still working those. Ms. McCoy and I are in contact, and we've discussed, like, we're aware that they're going through a concurrence process right now. We've discussed an extension to get this done. The concurrence process is fairly lengthy. In about 2 months, we have a process, a follow-up process, where we will reach out to VBA and start asking for, when are you going to provide our answers to the recommendations? So in about 2 months, we'll start official follow-up.
And will you keep this committee informed of how those recommendations are being implemented so we can kind of keep some oversight on, be sure this problem is being addressed?
Absolutely, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Titus. Mr. Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. McCoy, I need to know, you said a while ago when speaking to the chairman and answering his question that training will now occur. Is that correct? Are you working on training now so that this will not happen again?
Training is ongoing all the time.
Okay.
We are updating the training and the policies.
Okay, the concern I have is in our documents and what we've got, prior, the assistant director assumed the previous RMO has provided SDA staff with training, but there was no assurance that it had occurred, and that's why we're back in this spot. Is that correct?
I don't.
Apparently it is, because otherwise we would have stopped it from occurring again, correct?
I think the minimum human error that was involved here, which cannot be minimized, but I don't want to make more of it than it is also, there was a vacancy, an interim vacancy, and we were working to fill that. We were reorganizing our support service divisions at the time, and it is not accurate that we were not filling behind that position. We were filling behind it in a hybrid manner, so that would be additional duties on top of the RMO duties. Because there was so little paper going through the regional offices compared to what we had in 2008 when we had 100% paper-based process. Now, 99.8% of our processing in our compensation claims is done with digits and not with paper.
Okay, what kind of backup do you have there in all electronic records?
I would ask my colleague, Mr. Houston, to speak to that. I am not the IT person. He's a little closer to that than I am.
Sir, 2 years ago, we began the central intake process for VBA. Before that, every single claim, every single piece of evidence came in paper. And in the last 2 years, we've transitioned that to, in 3 venues. One, 13% of the documents we receive now, we receive online through e-benefits directly into the e-file. 36% of the documents we receive by fax. We receive them digitally. They immediately go into a digital mail queue. Again, they're electronic, they can't be lost. And then in the last 2 years, with our central mail program, 13%, an additional 13% of the documents we receive are received directly at our intake sites, where they're opened and imaged the same day. So now in the last 2 years, we've gone from 100% paper at regional offices, 56 different intake methods, to 61% of our inbound communications are received digitally or are digitized the day we open the envelope. So at this point, only 39% of the evidence we receive from veterans is even paper to begin with, which greatly reduces our opportunity for any sort of misrouted or lost document.
Okay. I guess my next question, Mr. Arante, how do you feel, or how do you respond to the VA's testimony that the error rate is actually less than 1% and not indicative of the whole VBA system?
Sir, I think there may be some, I think it's the way we're doing math. We did look at 400,000 documents, but we went through those documents to specifically identify claims-related documents. So if you want to do the division, then the 0.06% that she's talking about, that Ms. McCoy is talking about, I guess is one way to look at it. But we narrowed our universe down to only those claims-related documents that we found, and that was 155. And then we looked at all 155 of those.
I'm trying to find out if, okay, I won't say it's called cooking the books, but it's kind of whichever way you're selling it, okay? And is that because you're saying that you look at it one way and that's where you come up with your numbers, and the VA looks at it another way, and that's the way they come up with their numbers, which makes it very difficult for this committee as we move forward to try to deal with this issue, along with many other issues that we're having with the VA similar to this, and to try to get it under control in a system that really works. And each one, unfortunately, I keep seeing the VA come forward and say, one, either, not just in this instance, it's not our fault, or it's not as bad as everybody says. Well, it is as bad as everybody says if you're the person that's had your records that this occurs with. And I've been on the committee now since being here, a year and a half, and I've watched this over and over again, and it becomes very frustrating when I have to go back to my constituents and try to answer for the VA when either you've got too big in so many areas and you're just out of control, and we've got to get this under control. And for you to come back here a second time with the same problem is really a problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. Ms. Brownlee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and Ranking Member Titus for holding this hearing today. I think it's very important that we follow through with oversight when issues are raised, so I appreciate it very much. I wanted to ask Mr. Arante, I think Ms. McCoy is saying that staff was trained to do the RMO duties, and I think you're stating that they weren't trained, so I just wanted to get a clarification there.
Yes, ma'am. I'm gonna defer this to Ms. Sullivan. She was actually on site when her team conducted the reviews, but I can tell you that when we interviewed the SSD staff who were supposed to be taking over this responsibility, they unequivocally told us that they had not been trained. Dana?
Yes, ma'am. We interview folks at the regional offices when we go out and do our inspections and our hotline reviews. And we were told by the former RMO that he had not provided training, formal training. We spoke to the support services division staff who were doing the duties of the RMO, and they told us they had not received the training as well. And we followed that up with discussions and interviews with the assistant director, who confirmed with us that she had not followed up on whether or not that training had taken place.
Ms. McCoy, can you respond?
Thank you, Congresswoman. In talking to the LA Regional Office Director several times about this, I would add and clarify that he said that the IG folks never talked to the SSD, the Support Services Supervisor, who was actually performing the duties. There were other people helping, but no one talked to him. Also, the former Records Management Officer had conducted the training and was still involved in helping when necessary to review records. So these duties were being performed by folks who were capable and trained to do it. There's a disconnect somewhere.
There is a disconnect somewhere. So, Ms. McCoy, in your testimony, I think you were making the point that you believe at this point that the mistakes that occur are relatively small, and I concur that in any sort of management organization, there's going to be some human error involved, and I get that. That's not to say that we accept it, but that, and we have to do something about it, but I accept that notion. I think, I wanted to follow up on the chairman's line of questioning and Ms. Titus's line of questioning in terms of just trying to really understand the accountability measures that are going to be in place. So previously, the IG makes visits, site visits, finds mistakes. They're going to follow up on that. You will follow up on that. But what are the measures actually embedded now into your system that you will find mistakes, not the IG, that you will find mistakes, rectify those mistakes, and what's your reporting mechanisms so that you know internally where the mistakes are happening? It shouldn't be, in my opinion, for this committee to ask you to make a report and you come and tell us. We should be able to, I think at any time, be able to look at the records and see what you have identified, what mistakes are there, and we can all sort of concur. So that's what I'm looking for, is what are those accountability measures? Now, you also said that the paperless system is part of that accountability, and I mean, a paperless system, I think, is the right way to go, and I think it may eliminate some of the errors made just in terms of pushing paper. But a paperless system, I think, is better for efficiency purposes, but not necessarily accountability systems. So if you could just, inform us on what are those embedded accountability measures.
I'd be happy to, thank you. So I would like to briefly touch on the accountability for the paper, and then I'd ask Mr. Houston if there's time to talk about the accountability in the electronic system. So as far as the records management policies and procedures, I mentioned we're updating them right now. Our Office of Management, which oversees records management, is taking into account the IG findings, best practices from across our regional offices, and then incorporating the records management piece of a digital environment. So those things are ongoing. We do keep records violation logs in our regional offices. The RMOs keep logs of anything they find, so that is an important piece of this. They give feedback to the supervisors and the employees if they find that they're missing signatures or annotations. So these are ongoing, and I did mention our oversight visits. So as far as the electronic piece of this—
Mr. Chairman, I know my time. Thank you.
Mr. Houston, I think, can elaborate on that.
So in the electronic system, the first thing is that as soon as we image it, it's permanent. Even if we identify later that it's not of evidentiary value for a record, we've still got that image. And so if someone were to delete it, no matter when or where we find a problem, we can go back, restore that image, and see who deleted it. The second thing is, in the logs Ms. McCoy mentioned, that is a log of a paper system, and it's almost it's a digital log, but it takes a human being to key it in. In the digital system, if someone identifies a document as not belonging in a claims folder, and it goes in the digital system to the RMO, and they say, no, we need to retain that, it'll track how many times somebody sent something back saying you shouldn't have marked this for disposal. And it's not human-driven. The system tracks it. So we've got a non-human, no human influence on a data tracking system that will tell us statistically, do we have some employees or some locations that are doing it more than others? What type of documents are they marking for deletion? And if it turns out we did it wrong, we can get it back. And the biggest piece there is that it's tracked by the system while they're doing their job. It's not them doing their job and then recording it. I'd be happy to elaborate on that if you'd like.
But is there a system in place that management, in some sense, checks in on that rather than the system, figuring that out, but we've got to make sure that we do something about it as well once?
So we are, yes, ma'am, we are checking in on the paper-based system, and updating these policies and procedures will incorporate this new electronic environment that we're in just in the past few years. And again, that's the direction for the future. We very much appreciate Congress's support to get us where we are. And going forward, we don't want paper coming in. The more digits and the more images we have that cannot be lost, and our digital fingerprint in the system of who touched it and moved it and did what with it, we won't be having these conversations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I read this report. Mr. Arante, I commend you and all those at the IG's office that worked on it. It is deeply frustrating. It is deeply troubling when I consider, and I'm from Pennsylvania, just looking by example, the Philadelphia VARO, last shred log documentation, December 2012. We look at claims-related documents without the required 2 signatures in shred bin, and I look at the Philadelphia data there, which isn't as bad as the Atlanta data, but that doesn't make it any much better. I get concerned when, and this isn't directed at you, but I get concerned when we see information like this, and the response from the VA is, well, we're going to, and with all due respect to you, Ms. McCoy, we're looking at revising our rules and regulations, our procedures, our requirements, when in fact there is nothing that prevents those working on these files from just doing their job properly in the first instance. And if you're not going to properly do your job, then it really doesn't matter what rules, regulations, or requirements are further added. Is there anything else that you could share with me, Mr. Arante, about the findings at the Philadelphia office that either aren't included in here or that make it unique or particular in any respect? And then, Ms. McCoy, I'll offer you an opportunity to respond as well.
Yes, sir. I'm going to defer to Ms. Sullivan. She's going to discuss, and in my testimony or my oral statement, we discussed a large number of bins with paper documents. Philadelphia was one of the offices that I think had 31 bins of documents. Most of the documents were properly scheduled to be shredded, but when you have that kind of volume in a paperless environment, it kind of increases the risk, in our opinion. Dana?
Certainly, sir. At Philadelphia, we did find 31 bins when we were there doing our surprise inspection. And we were told that the week before that, and we saw documentation that they had looked at 28 bins. The majority of the documents, as Mr. Arante said, had no value. They were paper, envelopes, those types of items that are okay to be shred, which is why we separated out the claims-related documents, because that's where the risk to veterans lies, is in
Right.
claims-related documents. And we talked to the RMT. They have an RMT, they're a records management technician, it's a similar position to the records management officer. And she told us that during her review each week, she would look at a random selection of bins. So she could not guarantee that they were looking at all claims-related documents prior to destruction as was required underneath the policy for VBA.
When I look at what types of claims-related documents in Philadelphia as provided in the IG's report, it seems to me, and look, I'm not a claims processor, like, it seems to me pretty self-evident that they would be related to a claim. And everybody makes mistakes, but am I off there? Isn't that stuff rather, aren't most of those documents self-evident? I mean, it's not really a close call, is it?
When we talked to staff, not only at Philadelphia, but at other regional offices, they said they were confused by the policy. Some said they hadn't had any training in quite some time, and they were not sure what documents needed a one signature, a two signature, a no signature, and that they were just confused, frankly.
Do you accept that as credible?
Based on the fact that we found some documents, we talked to some folks in Philadelphia, we asked them, some supervisors and some managers, should these documents have been shredded? And they were like, no, these should not have been shredded. They should not have been in the final gray bin. They should have been caught.
Ms. McCoy, what do you think the next steps are based on the findings in this IG report, which is just a flashpoint in time? And that's the point. People make mistakes. If these findings were in Philadelphia were over a year, you know, if that was the aggregate in a year, or maybe even a month, I can look at that and say, well, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of paperwork, but it just seems to me rather high given that flashpoint in time. And again, I'm speaking specifically about Philadelphia, and Atlanta is certainly a lot worse. But can you share with me your concerns and what you think needs to be done moving forward? And specifically, beyond just new rules or regulations, which candidly somebody can ignore while they're sitting at their desk, and if there's not the oversight afterward, then a new rule or regulation isn't going to really accomplish much.
Absolutely. Every record is important, and I don't want to look at any veteran and have to say or explain that we mishandled something. Mr. Houston's comments earlier about the electronic environment and all the safeguards, that is the answer. That is the way to go. As we get there during the transition, we do have humans involved in the process, and we're doing everything we can to help them understand what they need to do, and that's why we have our multiple layer review process. Some of the, a bulk of the documents that are moving around in the regional offices for disposal are internally generated. So it's a copy of a letter that we printed out and realized there was a typo, or a draft of a rating decision that we then decided we needed to add something else. So I don't want to minimize any of this. Every document is important. But we're not talking about us throwing away claims, critical claims documents. The bulk of the paper we're working with is stuff that we make internally and realize we don't need it. Or there are duplicate documents that are already in the system that have come in again from a veteran or a veteran service officer, and we don't need them. But we have to annotate them to assure along the whole process that we know they're duplicate. And some of these violations, if yes, it's accurate that we didn't follow a policy if we didn't put the right initials and annotations, but that doesn't mean the paper gets thrown away.
I agree, and I think it's one thing when, and I know I'm over, it's one thing when you needed two signatures and you only got one. I think it's entirely different when you need a signature and you don't get any. I think that's a darker shade of problem. But I'm over my time. I appreciate the response from all three of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. Mr. Zeldin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. McCoy, by any chance, do you know of a case involving a Mr. John Mitchell?
I'm familiar with Mr. Mitchell, yes.
Okay. Why is he not receiving aid in attendance?
I would say that we could, I'd be happy to have myself and our compensation service folks sit down and have a deeper conversation. I think the overall answer is that the evidence that we reviewed in that case doesn't substantiate entitlement to that benefit. And I know that there has been a lot of back and forth on that case. I personally have asked our headquarters experts to make sure we did it right, and we've done that a couple of times. So we are not finding entitlement based on the evidence we have.
We admit that John Mitchell is a veteran and that he served in special operations for over 20 years. There's no doubt about that biographical part of his service, correct?
Sir, I'm not that intricately familiar with his particular case. I know that we have had multiple reviews and a lot of conversation.
Okay, but you're not even willing to admit that he served in the military. You came here, you admit that you know his case.
Yes.
And you're not even willing to, you're not intimately involved in his case enough to even vouch that he served in the military.
On the spot in this moment, I don't know those intricacies. I believe he did, but I did not rate the case.
Okay, so just imagine this. You serve for over 20 years in the military, you're in special operations, you deploy into combat. You suffer a traumatic brain injury after a 1,250-foot parachute fall. You're involved in a military vehicle accident. You are, at the point now, legally blind, and you desperately need aid and attendance, and you completely qualify for it. After suffering multiple military injuries connected to your service, serving your country, willing to lay down your life for it, and you reach out for help. And despite meeting all of the legal obligations, all the legal requirements to qualify for aid and attendance, after serving your country for over 20 years, you can be watching a video where a House Veterans Affairs Committee is speaking with the representative from the Department of Veterans Affairs on this topic of the handling of paperwork and taking care of our veterans, and never wanting to tell a veteran that there's been any type of mishandling of your paperwork. And I'm asking you about his case. You acknowledge that you know of his case, and even though this has been brought up at past Veterans Affairs Committee hearings, I can't even get you to admit that he served our country. Now, just imagine if you're at home, and after serving, your country for literally decades and deploying into combat, you can't even get the Department of Veterans Affairs to acknowledge that you served, let alone the fact you have to live your entire life with traumatic brain injury from a parachute fall and a military vehicle accident. That's how you personalize what this isn't just about paper. I'm offended on behalf of my constituent. I thank him for his service. I'm willing to not only acknowledge that he served our country, but that his traumatic brain injury that he suffered as a result of it, which qualifies him for this benefit, at the very least at this point, in June of 2016, after everything he's gone through trying to get this approval, maybe the Department of Veterans Affairs can at least acknowledge that he served. That right there was one of the most, if not the most offensive answers I've heard in any committee hearing that I've been in. And if you put yourself in the position of John Mitchell, I implore you, please, at the end of this committee hearing, to relook at his paperwork, because everything is there to get this man the help that he needs. And at the very least, at this point, after what we just witnessed with the answer to that question, I think the Secretary owes John Mitchell an apology and a thank you for his service. At the very least, your department can acknowledge he served.
Thank you, Mr. Zeldin. I'm going to ask a couple of follow-up questions, so we're going to start a second round here. Mr. Arante, this will go to you. Your testimony explained inappropriately shredding of documents, how it impacts our veterans, and we understand that in their claim process. Yet your office didn't follow up on the 2008 findings until recently. So why hasn't your office made this more of a priority?
Sir, unless I didn't speak clearly, we did follow up after the 2008 incidents where we found all the inappropriate shredding. Our benefits inspection divisions, which were newly created in 2009, we looked at 9 regional offices over a 9-month period. And initially, there was compliance. I think the compliance rate, and don't hold me to this, I can get you the numbers, but I think initially there was an 88% non-compliance rate. We were still finding 88% of the documents we looked at should have not been shredded. And then towards the end of that year, in December, I believe it went to below 10%. And so then at that time, we have to conduct risk assessments of the protocols we look at based on the staffing. So we shifted some of our work from that to look at issues like traumatic brain injury, temporary 100% claims. But we did look at the policy for about 9 months to make sure the staffs were, at these offices, were complying.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you this too, Mr. Arante. How do you respond to the VA's testimony of Ms. McCoy's that the error rate is actually less than 1% and is not indicative of VBA systemic issues?
Again, sir, and as Ms. Sullivan indicated, when we look through these bins and we're looking for mail, we go through a lot of paper documents. Some of them are Post-it notes, some are envelopes. So if you want to count that as the total universe of documents that we looked at, then that's one way to do the math. What we were looking for is claims-related documents, and we found 155. So to us, that's 100%. We found 155 at that snapshot in time, so 100% of what we looked at should have not been there, and that was the 155. So we had to filter through the okay stuff to find the universe that we wanted to find.
And I think that's my concern, is that, we're having voodoo math here on some of these issues, so we'll continue. Ms. Titus?
Thank you. I would just go back, Ms. McCoy, you said we don't want to receive any paper. We don't want paper. We want everybody to do electronic filing. Well, if some of those veterans are like me, that's a problem because they're low tech. But what are you doing to get the VSOs or get our veterans to apply online as opposed to send in paper? Are we helping them to do this so that they can then in turn make the system work better?
Yes, we are. We are making sure they have access. We are increasing the capabilities in those systems to upload documents electronically. We have fax capabilities to send them in, and they're digitized immediately upon receipt of the fax. And I know there are concerns that there are, as you say, low-tech veterans or folks in rural areas who might not have access to a computer or a scanner or something like that. Another solution is don't send it to the regional office, send it straight to the scanning vendor. That way we don't have to put it in a box and then send, take the time and the expense to send it to the scanning vendor. There's a P.O. box, it's P.O. Box 4444 in Janesville, Wisconsin, and someone can send it straight to the scanning vendor for us. It doesn't get to a regional office. There's not handoffs with humans touching the paper. It goes right into digits and is scanned immediately.
So are you in communication with VSOs? Have they offered any input into how to make this process better or anything they need to help their veterans, their members apply in this way?
Yes, we have been working with them, and I'd ask Mr. Houston to elaborate on that, please.
Ma'am, we've been working with the VSOs on both when they send us information, how do we make it so that our systems make it digital, where we use smart technology to extract file numbers, names, contentions. So even though the veteran wrote it and sent it to us in paper, right as we scan it, we make it just as if they'd applied online. And we're making changes to the VA forms to accommodate that. We've also added so that when you send us a fax, you get a fax confirmation page back right away that says this is the number of pages we've got. We confirm that we've got it. And we're expanding that so you'll get more than just a confirmation page. You'll get a confirmation page when we receive it, and you'll also get an update once the claim has been put under control in VA systems. And all of those changes were due to direct feedback from veteran service officers. We've also been working to enable veteran service officers who have their own imaging systems to upload directly to VA systems from theirs rather than print, mail, and we rescan it. And we're doing that for a couple of reasons. One is because I want to spend less money on scanning. We've scanned 2 billion images in the last 4 years. Wow. Anytime I can get it digitally to begin with, I save the taxpayer a lot of money. So we're working with the VSOs to get it directly from them digitally, and I know that the VSOs have been really aggressive about pushing both scanners and fax machines into their remote offices to increase our ability to get it electronically. So we'll work with VSOs to get it more electronically with more data, and then we've also worked with them to make sure that when we get paper, we can make it electronic rapidly and accurately, because we really want to make sure no matter what generation of a veteran you are, we take care of you. In addition on that, with older records, we have specific technologies, hardware and software in place to handle older records. I think we're probably the leading edge on microfiche reading because we still get microfiche records. We've got specialized equipment for that. We've got specialized equipment for the old onion skin records. We've got some really terrific equipment. We've been resourced by, this committee and others to make sure we get that done right. And a lot of that is aimed at making sure we can handle older records as fast or faster than new records.
Well, that's good to hear. Do you have a scanning center in the West?
We do not, ma'am.
Maybe we need to look at that.
What we have done is we use a competitive contract, and we award it to two competitors at the same time, and we essentially make them compete for veterans business every day. Whichever one of them is doing better gets more work. Whichever one is doing poorly gets less work. On that note, though, we don't tell them how to do their business. We bring a good industry-government partnership in where industry brings its best game, best value for the taxpayer, and we make sure they do it. We really haven't dictated where they put them. We just dictate the results they give us.
And you're confident that the records are kept safe there and there's not a problem at that level that maybe the
Absolutely.
AIG hadn't looked at?
In addition to the quality of the records, record security is huge. At our scan sites, you can't take paper in, you can't take a cell phone in, you can't take a camera in. Anything electronic you take in is examined. When you walk out, you hold your jacket out from you so they can see you're not taking anything with you. And then we use a 5-tier accuracy review on what we scan. Our vendors use individual quality reviews on their people. They do inline audits of their process. We have an independent company go in and audit that process. We also use the accuracy controls in the software and the hardware. And then our last accuracy review is the VA employee when they're looking at the claim and looking at, did I get it? Was it scanned right? Was it clear? Was it readable? Is there a page missing? And so we use both physical controls on the paper in the sites and all kinds of electronic controls on the quality we get from them. I'd welcome anybody, any congressmen or your staffers or VSOs. We routinely show them through our sites because we're really proud of the value those folks are giving to veterans.
That'd be interesting. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. McCoy, you've basically testified that almost now 100% of the claims are processed electronically, almost there. And so do you have any idea what percentage of appeals are processed electronically and what the time frame is for that?
A majority of the appeals are in electronics, both for VBA and also the Board of Veterans Appeals.
Is that like 51% or?
I think it's more like 60 to 70%, but I would have to check on that.
And the timeline?
And the timeline, so I believe this year, Mr. Houston, in getting the best value we can and maximizing the amount of scanning we can do, we're looking for additional opportunities to have regional offices send any remaining appeals folders and paperwork to the scanning vendor so it is electronic as well.
But a timeline, by what date?
We're looking to have it done by the end of the calendar year, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So again, Ms. McCoy, you've concurred with recommendations from the IG. You said you're in the process of releasing additional guidance on that. And again, timeline, when is that going to happen and how will it be executed in all the VA offices?
Our Office of Management is working on that right now. I believe they have an early draft. It will go through concurrence. If I had to tentatively put a timeline, I would think in the next maybe 6 to 8 weeks, we would have that policy updated and concurrence completed. Then we would do all of the necessary training at the regional offices on that and then start whatever oversight changes are generated by that new policy.
And last question, just with regard to congressional inquiries. I know that there was, I think the IG, maybe it wasn't the IG, but I know that in Atlanta, it was identified that congressional inquiries were not properly uploaded. And so can you clarify are you putting forward, again, new guidance, new policy vis-à-vis congressional inquiries?
Yes, that will be part of the updated policies and procedures. Right now, there is some gray area as to whether just general congressional inquiries are supposed to go into the claims folder itself. We have, in the regional offices, separate tracking mechanisms for, requests on status of claim and things of that nature. And the policy is that if there's any attachment of evidence, that goes into the claims folder. There's still a little squishiness there, and we're asking our experts to shore that up to make sure it's very clear to employees everything from congressional inquiry perspective that needs to go in the folder versus on a spreadsheet or something of that nature.
Thank you. I yield back.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brownlee. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the subcommittee, I thank you for your testimony, and this testimony has raised some serious questions about how the VA is handling the paper documents. And I appreciate that the VA has made some progress since 2009 hearing on this issue, but the IG reports prove that the veterans' paperwork is still ending up in the shred bin when it should not. I look forward to working through these issues with the department and my colleagues on the committee. Again, thanks to everyone for being here, and as initially noted, the complete written statement of today's witnesses will be entered into the hearing record. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I thank the members and the witnesses for their attendance and the participation today. This hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Titus.